right. Guess we're live.
Yes, sir.
Welcome back. Conversations from the underground. You should know how it goes by now if you're jumping in the middle of the whole deal. This is episode 17.
That's correct.
Missed a couple of weeks here and there, but we've been persistent, and we start off with just kind of basic conversation, see where um, the discussion takes us, and kind of try to sum up with a nice little quote to wrap everything up together. So, without further ado, how's it going, my man?
What's up, man? Same old, trying to catch up with work and whatnot. I will say this. Man, I only have one 1302 class.
Mm.
And I really enjoy it because it's made up of a lot of my former 1301 students. Like 98% of the students are from my 1301 class. So they already understand the vibe. And we have very good conversations in the class because of the diversity of my students. And what I mean by that is many of them are international. I got two students from Syria or the Hungary by way of Syria, but they're Hungarian by way of Syria. And then I have a student from Germany who you met last year, who had participated in the Men of Color, some type of multicultural presentation. His mom is German as well. She spoke at the
Yeah. What's his name?
So he's in the class too. His name's Cody.
Cody, yeah. I remember that.
And then I have students from Nigeria, students from Ecuador, El Salvador. It's just oddly international. And with everything going on regarding our economy, this is my 1302 class, by the way. Students were bringing up BRICS. Students were bringing up, and BRICS is that economic alliance,
right,
made up of various nations that are making decisions to no longer use the US dollar for trade amongst those cooperating countries. Mexico just recently submitted an application. That's why some of my Mexican students are interested as well into how this goes. My Hungarian student was worried. He goes, Mr. Salas, do you think that this is good news or bad news for the United States moving forward regarding this economic situation? And normally I take a very braggadocious, egotistical, arrogant American stance, right? Like, I don't care about no BRICS. The American dollar is the American dollar, and that's just the way it is. It's going to be. You guys join your little goofy organizations, and it means nothing to us. You're going to take our dollar whether you like it or not. I used to run with that attitude all the time. And I would tell my students oftentimes, what's a debt you can't collect? As we're amassing a great deal of debt, it doesn't matter if I'm in debt, if I'm in debt to you. If I'm Debo on the block, what you gonna do? You're gonna step up to Debo? And the United States walks around like they're Debo on Friday.
right.
So what's a debt you can't collect? And with now these nations beginning to say, well, we don't need your dollar anymore. We're going to use our own currency when it comes to trading. I was wondering, I think I misspoke, or I spoke too soon on that issue now.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't want to say that with pride.
Yeah, one thing I'd say, if you're Debo, then you ain't gotta ask for debt. You say what you got on my 40, homie, instead of acting like you need to borrow the money. You can borrow the money and then you can decide not to take it back. But the fact that you asked for it and needed to ask for it in the first place instead of just taking it.
That's so funny. I should have said that. What you got on my 40, homie?
In need, you know what I mean? Like, you do need this if you need the money from them. Now you may not pay it back, so it cause some issues. This was interesting.
So you're saying we're not Debo then? You're saying we're more like Smokey?
I'd say definitely. And
okay.
To kind of back it up, or maybe not anymore. I would say, and to back it up a little bit, you mentioned this in the previous episode that we worked together, and I've been so out of the news that I didn't even know what it meant. I hadn't looked at it yet, and I meant to go back and look at it again, which I did a couple of times for maybe about a total of 20 minutes or so, just briefly scanning things. I didn't get to really go into depth, and then a student today, after class, asked me about it a little bit more. Asked me what I thought about this, and after responding to him, I went upstairs on my way to my office, and then chopped it up with my dad real quick and asked him what he thought about it. I need to look more into thinking in more detail, but my view lately has been, China. The history of China is pretty interesting. If you take a world history approach, it's one of the longest sort of reigning cultural civilizations in history. For a brief point of being, overtaken by the Mongols, who, quite frankly, became absorbed into China when they took over China. But the rest of the dynasties were very Han oriented, and then the Manchus come in the last dynasty, but they turned themselves into this Han ethnic culture as well. And so I'm thinking, Chinese history has this 100 years revenge philosophy. It's been so long that China has experienced rise and fall, greatness and despair so many times that it's normal to them. And when they're down, they have this 100 revenge philosophy of like, well, in 100 years from now or so, we're going to rise back up, and when we do, we'll get we'll get retribution. We'll make things right, so to speak. And maybe we're seeing that cycle begin to emerge again, right? One of the biggest mistakes is this belief that what goes up doesn't come down, or that history is somehow going to remain static ever since the United States of America took the reins of the neighborhood and tried to become Debo, which maybe they did for a while. But as globalization began to really take on a whole nother level with technology, and the Chinese began to adapt the same way that they always have. We just haven't seen it yet because they've been under the yoke of this Maoist philosophy that did tremendous amount of damage in the 60s and 70s that they're just now kind of recovering from. That they may end up being there. And a lot of people don't realize, man, there's been times in history where China was the most powerful, dominant world force, and there was very long years of quite peaceful relationships that existed. One of the students said, doesn't that make you scared? Don't you get worried about this thing? Is what he asked. One of the things he asked me. And I think he's Vietnamese, which could explain maybe something there with the power dynamics between China and Vietnam. I don't really know that for sure. I'm just assuming by his name. But I was like, I don't know. I don't really get scared about stuff like that. I mean, because I just adapt and respond and react to the environment and see what I see and point out what I can, and as a quasi sort of anarchist type of person who just kind of deals with my surroundings, I'm like, until I see the Chinese coming to my front door, I'm probably not going to be.
Well, maybe.
And even then, that depends on what they're asking for.
Well, we can't forget this generation, because of their access to technology, they're inundated with information almost immediately. They are also, I don't want to say they're hypersensitive to things, but their exposure to certain things makes them, I guess, I don't want to say paranoid, but there's catastrophe that it may be inevitable. And the pandemic does not help this.
Sure.
The notion that an international phenom, and I don't want to call COVID a phenom, but it was that novel virus, right? That occurs internationally, as to whether or not if it was leaked from a lab, or the notion is that it didn't start internally within the United States, that there are these external international variables outside of our control that will have an impact on our society, whether you like it or not. I mean, it ultimately transformed much of our economy. It transformed how we all operated, variably, because we live in, the United Republics of America. New York, I mean, they locked it down. California was locking it down, and Texas was, running around, willy nilly, raw dog style. I mean, like, it was just, like, but to say that we weren't impacted, even if we were in Texas, I mean, and that hit us at our doorstep. Now, does this economic downturn for the United States, would that impact us? You know what? I've never known anything different. You've never known anything different. As far as, and what I mean by that is personally experienced. We've always lived in generations where the United States was the preeminent economic superpower.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we're built, if the American psyche is built to be a number two, a number three.
It's interesting, and I would say maybe it kind of depends on the perspective too of the person within the United States. I mean, this reminds me of a Gil Scott-Heron song, "Whitey on the Moon," when he's like, "A rat done bit my sister's ear, but Whitey's on the moon. I can't pay my doctor bills, but Whitey's on the moon." And the whole song is this sort of like discussion about how great the United States is becoming, and I'm in here barely live. So maybe some people, some elements of our society will already be used to the change, and make it better for some people. Who knows the ways in which these ramifications work?
Fair enough.
But I would say, um,
by the way, these countries include Brazil, Russia, India, and China. These aren't like, and no disrespect, these aren't slouches. Like, these guys are, and they're headhunting for us more often than not, economically. I saw a stat, which country owns the most guns? United States, obviously, with almost close to 400 million. India is second. When we think about the nuclear capacity of those countries,
you're going to have a leader come out of those areas. And that in and of itself is a big deal. You got this alliance, but who's going to take the reins? It seems as though China will be the case. That will be the case. But one of the things that's making China so big and strong is they're opening up their society to more people developing into the middle class. And if you want to do that, you're going to have to do some things differently that are going to ultimately cause conflict between that alliance system. Because you can't get influence. Your currency is not going to supersede the dollar until the world is confident that that thing's going to be valuable. And that's a big deal. My dad was kind of explaining this thing to me. Is like, you got Usain Bolt killing everybody, not even close. And then maybe like, say you got some people starting at like 15 second 100-meter dashes, and then they go from 15 seconds down to like 13 seconds, big leap. 13 seconds down to 11 seconds, big leap. 11 down to like 10, and then high nines. But then once you get to the really nitty gritty part to try to even catch him, you're still far away because of how set and great this guy is. Like, you can rush up But when it comes to those little bitty seconds that make the difference to put you in the driver's seat, that's where the real test starts to come. And the United States been through that conditioning and has been in this position forever. The GDP is what everybody bases this stuff on, and it's nowhere near. These people are still at 15 seconds. Right? They still got to make their way to 11 and 10 before they start getting real close to try to pass. The bigger issue, I would say, which kind of fits in with the whole Bitcoin culture, not Bitcoin, but cryptocurrency more broadly, is to what extent are we seeing such a seismic shift as moving away from countries and nation states being the organizing principle? And many nationalists complain about this already by using the disparaging term globalist, right? Globalist agenda, because we may be very well involved in this sort of multinational era. We've been going towards that era for a long time. I've been studying a lot lately about the late 1800s, the early 1900s, these conventions, international conventions, trying to like create laws of drug distribution and cultivation and consumption regulations that started to really pick up in the 1920s with the League of Nations, which was the first real multinational organization. Then World War II kind of dismantled that, and they came back with the UN afterwards. And there's just been larger and larger entities ever since the 60s and the 70s. And now that these multinational corporations have a lot of power as well, there may be this reorganizing type of structure by the time we're done.
Right. That'd be interesting.
Say it again.
That'd be interesting. That sounds crazy interesting. The notion of maybe moving away from this primitive national support currency to a more, like not esoteric, but it's like this something that's in the ether, like a Bitcoin.
Abstract, but it's unswitchable. That's what's so amazing about it. As long as you got electricity and all that stuff, of course. But if you think about how we lost the gold standard and moved into the paperback, there was a transition period where they started using promissory notes, right? So you go give the bank a bunch of gold bars, and they would give you a piece of paper in exchange that said it was worth this much.
Right.
Then you'd go back to the bank, and sometimes the dude wouldn't even be there. They just skipped town on your ass and left with all your stuff. Now you got a piece of paper.
Well, I mean, what we have now are reserve notes.
Sure.
I mean, it's roughly the same regard. I mean,
but back to this thing. So, or you'd give them the piece of paper, and the money would fluctuate so much that it wouldn't even be worth as much as it was because of so much inflation. Once they developed this standard that kind of like created this greenback by the turn of the 20th century, it became much more stable. We imagine it to be so valuable, but you can still manipulate it, right? It can still inflate. You can still counterfeit it. You can do all of these things that now cryptocurrency strengthens even more, right? Like there will forever be a ledger that shows the exact nature of each transaction from one to another. It never goes away. You can't hide any of it. It's all going to be there with blockchain technology. In some way, this is just another stronger, more secure and stable form of currency. But we all have to agree that that's the case first. We still haven't agreed yet. No matter what, you can say Bitcoin is whatever, but what makes Bitcoin valuable is the fact that it's worth X amount of dollars, right?
Right, still backed by dollars.
Yeah, you want a Bitcoin because it's worth 50,000 American dollars. That's why you want it. You wouldn't want no Bitcoin if it was worth you know, something else, 50,000 pennies. You want it because it's worth the cash money, because we still believe the American dollar is
It
the
is
de
worth
facto
something.
value.
But and that's fine, right? But here's the thing about, I guess, the Bitcoin being worth that amount of money. You have to find somebody who's willing to pay that amount for that Bitcoin. It's almost like gambling, or when you go to a casino. Yeah, the chip does say a million on it, but it don't mean anything until you cash out.
Yeah, and they hand
You
you the
feel me?
cash.
So the reality though is that there's not enough cash out to recoup all of this fake Bitcoin type of money to begin with. Secondly, the value of our money is predicated on whether or not if we think it has worth. Most Americans, when they go to work, ain't nobody going into work talking about, dang, they pay me way too much up in here. Nobody says that going to work.
Right.
Everybody goes to work saying what? These fools don't pay me enough up in here.
Right.
And right then and there, they're doing what to the value of their dollar? They're devaluing it. Okay, you can't say anything negative about something and then not devalue it. You know, if I walk into, my bedroom and my lady's there and I go, man, this relationship, dang, what am I doing right then and there in front of her about the value of our relationship? I'm devaluing it. So most Americans are devaluing their own currency by saying, I don't get paid enough. I don't get paid enough. I don't get paid enough, which would want us to want more what? Want higher salaries or higher pay. And then if we have to create money to satisfy that higher pay, well, then that devalues the currency itself. And we can devalue our own currency. That's fine, because America has always done that. What I mean by that is saying we want more, we want more, we want more. We're insatiable. But now other countries, and we could do that because other countries have always coveted the US dollar. You see, we can devalue it because everyone else covets it. We could, like, if we're in a relationship, I could not like my lady. You know what I'm saying? But it's okay because everybody else loves my lady. They covet her or whatever. That means that there's value there, even though I'm being disrespectful or I'm being dismissive towards my lady. In this particular case, as Americans are devaluing their own currency by way of not saying it's ever enough, the problem now, though, is that other countries are beginning to say, we don't want to use your currency anyways. You see, our power rested with the fact that they valued it, but now they're not valuing it. If anything, they're saying, we don't even want to use it.
Yeah, well,
And it
they're
was
trying to say that. We don't know if it's going to work.
India has already began acting upon this measure to primarily trade. I don't recall who exactly they're trading with, but India has already stopped using the US dollar.
Yeah, so
They've already taken
one of the
action.
things that reminds me of, like, when people start, like, the more you have rich people say, pay me in Bitcoin, the more people start saying, I want this, the more it'll start to catch on. It tends to take a little while. The value devalue thing, I think of it a little bit, maybe, I don't know if it's differently, but I just sort of think of, like, just a sense of supply and demand. Money is a representation of the value of other things. So if you go to your job, um, and you're like, they don't pay me enough, usually it's because you don't have enough money to pay for everything that you are doing in your life. But if I went to TCC tomorrow, and they just started paying me $30,000 extra a year, I'd be pretty happy. It'd be like, yeah, I'm getting paid enough. Thank you. uh, and I'm
And
sure,
they're never gonna but no company will do that.
right?
Nobody
Well,
walks into their job to
I'm sure Bill probably appreciates how much money he makes. I sort of feel like if I was Josue, I'd feel like I made enough money. I
nah.
think,
But I think even for them, they still would be like, man, I wish I'd had another 10K.
yeah, okay.
You know,
So this
everything's
is a
relative.
great point. This is a problem. This is a problem now, not about value and devalue as much as about a cultural mindset. My dad and I started talking about this in that conversation where he was talking about how, in America, you give somebody $1,000 and then not only going to go spend all that money, then they're going to like take out more money that they owe. They're going to end up owing money instead of having that money. You give somebody in China $1,000, and they're immediately going to save 400 of it. Just put it away and not use it. The what did he call it? Impulse control, or the saving culture can make them explode once you get enough people into the middle class. You see this happening when you got Americans like my cousin Memers. I came over here. I didn't understand the culture of spending. So he makes so much money and he doesn't know what to do with it. And he still doesn't live like that. This is a cultural thing that exists in the United States, where the more money we make, the more problems we encounter, right? That's what they mean right there. The more money we come across, the more problems we see. Really means the more money you make, the more you feel like you need to spend it. The more things just magically start to show up where you feel it's a necessary need. And then you ever ask yourself, man, what if I didn't just come across this money right here and this happened? I'd be in some trouble. I wouldn't have any money. Maybe I'm lucky that I got this money here. Well, maybe not. Maybe like once you get the money, you start subconsciously putting yourself in position, because you live in a capitalist society that lends you to this. Put yourself into these certain situations where something is going to arise where you now have to pay more for.
And what I would argue is that you're right, because this happens at no matter what your income level. Mike Tyson has made hundreds of millions of dollars, but went broke. And now still makes, and still making hundreds of millions of dollars.
And even before they're broke, when they have all this money, there's been research that shows your happiness barometer, overall less of stress levels, general, what we mean by happiness, which we could debate, I guess, what is happiness, but without debating it, if we can generally have this concept of what it means to be happy and content and fulfilled, there's like a chart by which you make a certain amount of money. You're like, obviously, if you're below the poverty line, it's hard to be happy. But if you start making enough money, there becomes a point where your happiness continues to increase, and then you reach a peak to where the more money you make, the less happy you become. And they've done these studies, where you get somebody who gets a promotion at work, or they get some kind of win the lottery or something like that, and they get this surge of enjoyment and happiness that wears off, and then they start thinking, well, now I need to go to the next level, or I got this promotion to chair. Oh, well, now I need to be dean, and then you get the dean. Well, now I need to be vice president. Like once you get the promotion, and you get stabilized in there, your mind immediately starts to say, this isn't enough. I need something else. This is a cultural condition of mass consumerism, I think, that we live in. I always wish I could have an experiment to see if I was right, because I always tell my wife, like, yo, if y'all weren't with me, I'd be a millionaire right now. I'd have millions of dollars stacked up, just not being used, just stacked up.
Man.
Forever. I probably would electricity. I don't pay bills. I don't do any of this stuff. She does all these things. And I'd like to think that,
I'm pretty sure Brandy wasn't even talking to you. She's probably just looking off in the corner, making dinner, and here you come in the room talking about, man, I'd be a millionaire everyone for all y'all right now. And like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, we're trying to make cupcakes. What are you talking about? You just come in all random.
All random out of nowhere. Like, all this money I'll spend, all these things you buying, all this stuff you're accumulating, ain't using it for nothing. But but I got these two parts of my family, right? With my dad's side of these immigrants coming in with nothing, and then my mother's side with their compulsive consumption,
American
system, right?
American values.
Yeah, so I've always been sort of pooled between both. But it's interesting that even when in my family unit, if we come across a big chunk of money, how quickly it goes away, man. And you wonder, would you have even, what would things be like if you didn't come across that money?
Yeah,
Uh,
one of my students brought up. I don't know if you teach it in your class, but like the mercantilist system,
mm,
that economic system where the colonies, in some cases, were not allowed to trade amongst each other.
right.
That all of their raw goods were required by law to go to the mother country first
Hmm.
to be taxed,
Right.
to ensure safety or whatever nonsense they were making up. And that all business transactions required their involvement to some degree. And when I say they, Great Britain. And one of my students was like, well, maybe these other countries are starting to act like the colonies did when they said, we're going to trade amongst each other and without Great Britain's involvement to our benefit. Like you're just a middleman at this point. And when I was explaining this whole BRICS scenario to some of my students, or they were at least entertaining the conversation, they asked the question, well, why do countries even convert their money into US dollars for the sake of transactions in the first place? Why don't they just, to them, it seemed odd that other nations, in an effort to complete a trade transaction, would convert their national currency to the US dollar in order to complete the trade.
Yeah.
It just
So
seemed odd.
economics, man, that's the thing with this economics is we don't understand, if we don't study economics enough, and I'm guilty of it as well. If we don't study economics enough, then we don't understand the power and magnitude of the way in which we imagine the value of a currency and how it
Mm,
works and how economic structures kind of develop. So, like under that mercantilist thing, this takes place during the transition between feudalism and capitalism. It's one of the
mm-hmm,
reasons why capitalism emerges, because you live in this feudal order. And when you live in this feudal order with very little resources and very little world that you envision your sense and place in with your
mm-hmm,
surrounding, you develop this mindset of like resources are like a pie, right? I can cut up this pie in however many slices I want, but the minute I eat one, it's done. It ain't no getting it back.
mm-hmm,
So the notion that this mercantilist philosophy builds upon is that there's only so much wealth out there in the world, and we got to create policies to where we accumulate the most of it. So it led them to want to like bring in all this gold, and they didn't understand the value of like service industries and creating wealth, like right. Like we go into areas, for example, why do we go to war in Iraq? To bring democracy to the Iraqi people. Well, really, what that really means is that we're opening up a market for U.S. control and power to pervade the system. Why do we think that's going to work? Well, because Adam Smith and these Enlightenment kind of Scottish philosophers, and British more broadly philosophers are looking at this mercantilist system and the problems with it, and they're coming up with a better way to open up production, what they would call the pursuit of happiness, but giving people the ability to pursue their interests in a free market system is going to create massive production. But it's not going to create mass production until this elite group of people who are controlling the state lose out. So many of these people who are in control of states are essentially dominating their people, and they know that the dollar is the most valuable thing because the US economy makes more of anything. It produces its production power is so profoundly, astronomically higher than
But
any
that's not
other.
the case. Well, that's not the case anymore. Isn't it China now?
Well, it's shifting, but still, they're back. They're not close to Usain Bolt. They're speeding up, right? They're finishing the 100-meter race
Right.
way closer to Usain
Than they used
than they
to.
were. But
But they still back there.
yeah, 10 seconds to 9.8, yo, it's still gonna take you a minute. Like,
Right.
there really hasn't been a production machine like the capitalist system that the United States crafted and implemented and built since the Civil War
Mm.
in history.
Mm-hmm.
China has the capacity to do it, but they're going to have to change some things. You know, it's very difficult to achieve this without freedom of the press. It's very difficult to achieve this without giving the illusion of people having the right to really pursue their interests. If your people are nervous or worried about investing in something or moving or something or taking a leap in something, then the production and GDP is not going to be as high. But if your government is sort of like, not only I'm going to sit back and let you go pillage everything, I'm going to throw money at you to help you do that. Oh, you need land for this railroad here. You ain't got to pay for it. Just go. Subsidize it all. Give you everything. Like, it wasn't hands off. It was like completely hands on, trying to promote hands off, right? And China's not there yet. They still have tremendous amount of ramifications of imperialism that they got to deal with. The colonized mindset is very real. When China gets upset, when somebody says one thing about Taiwan, we see the colonized mindset coming out. When we see the way China gets upset with Hong Kong or with Tibet, we see the phobia of colonized mindset. And rightly so, because China from the 1830s to the 19 teens was thoroughly and utterly destroyed. I don't think people understand the ramifications of the economic decline between that time period. And when they had the opportunity to rise above, which they did, it descended into totalitarianism, and you had this massive famine, the last great famine in the history of the world. Arguably will never be one as catastrophic as the famine of the 60s and the 70s under Mao, right?
Under Mao.
But it takes a long time, and so I don't know. I think we'll see. We'll see how this BRICS and stuff works. But honestly, I don't think there'll be any change in the value in terms of who's number one in the American dollar until there's a transition of power in China that goes smoothly. Let's see what Xi Jinping, how he ends up getting out of power.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know how old he is too. I want to say he looks like he could be 70.
Yeah, but he's healthy. He looks strong. He ain't like Putin declining. But look what Putin did. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna be allying yourself with these types of maniacs in charge of governments. You ain't gonna be superseding the American dollar, man. People with big money, we're talking big money people. They're not gonna be coming into your country throwing money around to really create GDP if they're worried that the state's going to appropriate their funds and their goods and things like that. China's making some strides by entering the way in which they're entering Africa and the way they're entering Canada and buying land and all this stuff. And so there's going to be a big struggle. But we'll see, man, because, man, what we know is that peace brings prosperity. And until you can kind of come to that conclusion, I don't know. Now the United States problem is there's a lot of hypocrisy, right? You like to say the one thing and then behind the scenes do other things, and it's a fine line to tote to try to call those things out for what they are, and at the same time try to pursue policies that allow people to participate freely the way they need to when it comes to increasing production and getting you to that number one spot where your currency is the most valuable.
Yeah, I told my students, like, I'm gonna be all right. You know what I'm saying? I think I got like 20 more years left, 20 more good years left in me. So I think my money's gonna be all right now. I don't know what's going on with you all. You know what I'm saying? Like, by the time you guys get there,
yeah, that's why
things might be a little tight.
And it's like I would say, I feel like I'm gonna be all right regardless, because worst case scenario, I'm out in the woods and I'm surviving off what I can get.
Hey,
So
Brandy, you ain't got it
how to pick a
together?
fight. What's up?
You're yelling at Brandy. I'm in the woods. You
Right?
guys costing me millions. I'm gone now.
Yeah, learn how to make a fire, homie. Electricity. You know what I mean? Dig
Oh
a hole.
man.
Get ready. Get prepared. Do something about your nature deficiency syndrome, man. I think, and I've been interested in doing that lately. In fact, with in the nonprofit world, is trying to like get some funding to try to take people out into the woods and learn how to camp and learn how to survive and learn some basic techniques on how to rely on the resources around you instead of being so involved in what we like to call as conspicuous consumption, because that conspicuousness may very well go away in your lifetime, and the people who are going to be the first to go are the ones who can't live without a Starbucks.
You trying to be a nonprofit, The Last of Us?
Yeah, I mean, I ain't
You
trying to
trying to
go
be
film like doomsday prepper type stuff, but
a
some basic,
nonprofit doomsday prepper?
yeah, having some basic skills, you know what I mean, would help. But it also helps just going out there and doing those kinds of things, help reorient your mind and get you out of the concrete jungle for a little bit of time, which increases contentness and calm and complacent and helps you recoup, and makes you less consumption oriented. And if we want to have a chance, to survive, we got to eventually stop consuming so much stuff.
Can't do everything on an Xbox.
For real. Oh man.
Oh man. Well, I don't know how to call it, man. We're close to the end. I don't have any quotes on me. You got a list up?
I do. And I haven't really been. I've been trying to look at it, but I'm just gonna go with the first one that I see right here, and because I just read it and try to figure out maybe if there's a way I can make it fit. It's by an author. His name's Roald Dahl. I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but he wrote the book Holes, which they made a movie out of, which I liked, and Matilda, well, which I loved. But he says somewhere inside of all of us is the power to change the world. I feel like, I don't know, maybe there's this issue of the world changing right now. We're worried about it. We're concerned with it. We're worried about our position in it, our place within it, and what it means maybe to get past. But that can't happen until something inside of those people who are trying to make that last stretch to pass you, they pull something out of them that can help change the world. I think it's there, it's possible, but it takes a lot to reach deep in there, to try to change the world. And if you're going to be in that position, good things will have to come from it, because you wouldn't be in that position in the first place if you don't bring those good things. You don't need to be worrying about some totalitarian tyrant coming over to take over something like the United States. Maybe if China takes over the United States, it won't be a Maoist destruction. Maybe it will be more people cooperating, less suffering. I don't know, but we'll see.
I guess we're gonna have to see, man. I
Yeah.
guess we'll have to see.
Well, all right, man.
All right, we'll shut it down for the week. Till next time.
Right on. Peace.
Take it easy.